log number 265.
We are actually spirits, non-physical, in a non-physical world, and we're physical in a physical world as well. So I always talk to people about, in my opinion, the true balance of life is to live on the non-physical spiritual plane and at the same time as we live on the physical, so that we're non-physical and physical at the exact same time. And when we heal on a non-physical spiritual level, the physical body will tend to follow.
Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Get inspired and live out loud. From love, freedom, and success to having it all. Here's your host, coach, speaker, and shining star, Orion.
Roger, you're looking good.
Hello and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Today I have with me a very special guest and dear to my heart because she's a wonderful being and she helped me a lot because I got the privilege of having some coaching and guidance from her, and she helped me tremendously. Tina Zion is an intuitive medium, internationally acclaimed instructor and author of 3 medical intuitive books and 2 Reiki books. Tina teaches in Europe, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Canada, and throughout the US. Tina is a faculty member for 5 holistic organizations and healing retreat centers. She is absolutely extraordinary, and I can't even describe how magical she is. Maybe when you listen to this interview, you will get some of it. We spoke about how to connect to your spirit guides and how to call in the right ones and how to differentiate between the good ones and the bad ones, because there are some bad ones. I mean, this world has dichotomy. There is good and bad, light and dark. And when you want to call in your guide, you want to call in the right one and not one that will deceive you. So she's going to teach you how to do it. It's actually pretty simple, simpler than I thought. We all have an ability to access the non-physical, even if it feels a little weird. But I'm sure you had times in your life when you felt things and you knew that something more than what you can see is happening right now. So as I'm getting more and more into my connection with my guides lately, I am sharing with you this episode. And I have to admit, throughout my life, I was always connected. I always had, in meditation, went in and got guidance, and it's just I'm more present to it recently, and I wanted to share it with you. It's a lot woo-woo. It's a very woo-woo episode, but if you find it in yourself to expand your horizon into maybe believing that there is something beyond that can help you and you can connect with, it might be just the right thing for you to hear today. And now, without further ado, on to the show.
2, 1, 0.
Hey, Tina, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you share a little bit about your passion and how you found your life's purpose?
Oh boy, that's a big question right here at the start. So I am a mental health counselor and I'm a psychiatric nurse with a specialty certification in psychiatric nursing and a hypnotherapist. And all those things that I was doing, still I didn't feel as fulfilled by it. And I grew up in a very, very spiritually aware family. We all felt that it was natural to see deceased people. It was very, very common. Intuition was just recognized. So I grew up in a way that it was very normal. And none of us really have any special gift, and I would really want everyone to know that. we don't have a special gift because everyone is wired to be intuitive. And so while I had that background, I was still doing kind of regular worldly type jobs. And I still had this yearning, just this yearning to do energy work, yearning to do intuitive work. I started out with the energy work as a Reiki practitioner. And when I started doing Reiki, that's when the medical intuitive part began. I just spontaneously started to be able to see inside of people very, very accurately. And we got a lot of validation by it. And so that's really how it started, is really just this yearning that something was missing, that I could do more for myself in my own personal life, more for other people. Even though I was, a hypnotherapist, I was doing a lot of past life regressions, psychiatric nurse and things like that, and a counselor, that I was still just yearning for this non-physical level of healing. So that's kind of my long answer, I guess. It's a bit of a long one.
Actually, it was too short. I want to know more.
Oh,
It's very interesting. So when you say finding that passion to the non-physical healing, what was the journey like and what did you find?
the journey, like I said, began spontaneously while I was doing hands-on Reiki energy sessions for people. I began seeing inside of one of the first people. I was looking suddenly inside of her colon, and I could see cancerous polyps.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And then another person, I suddenly was looking inside of her lung, and I knew that her left lung was more inflamed than the right one. I knew that she was smoking, and that was really, really getting to her lungs. So those were the first two sessions that just spontaneously began. And I used to keep it, even though I was doing Reiki energy hands-on healing, I kept it a secret for quite a while and didn't tell anybody that, I was seeing in your colon and things like that. I didn't tell anybody.
You visually see it or you have a sense of it?
No, I could literally see it. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Just like a photograph, not really like an X-ray, but like a photograph. So I decided to tell people. So at the end of a Reiki session, I would say, I received some intuitive information about you, and would you be willing to, get off the massage table and come over here and sit down, and I'll tell you. And, people were thrilled. And I shouldn't have been afraid. And I would want your listeners, too, to realize that don't be afraid, because people are yearning for this level of information and this level of healing. And then, so anyway, I started telling people after their Reiki sessions, and oh my goodness, the feedback I got was phenomenal. And then I just got a little human form, just an outline of a front and back of a human form. And I started drawing with colored markers. So I would draw where it was real dark in their body, say their left shoulder or something was dark and it was inflamed and things like that. So I would draw that. But then I would also draw what changed during the Reiki session, how that just dissipated and it just, started sparkling with a different color during the healing. And then I would get messages from their guides. And so I would write their message down on this little human form. So it was just covered with, information. And I would hand it to them at the end of the session. Well, that people just love that because, we're working with a non-physical level of life. And when I handed them a piece of paper with this drawing and basically their story on it, that made so much difference for people. And some people would take them home and hang them up on the refrigerator because they would come to me multiple times. And so they could see how their energy field was improving, every time that they came. And so I got more and more. I just kind of, developed into actual healings too. So a lot of just wonderful healings began to happen. So that's really how that started.
Yeah, well, maybe if you can share a story of a remarkable healing, something that even surprised you.
Oh, gosh. There's actually so many. I don't know. That would surprise me. This one woman, this is the one I don't usually bring up, but see, I just take whatever popped. So what popped in was this one woman who came to me and she said she'd been to every doctor, every specialty clinic. She had been to chiropractors. She'd been everywhere. And her head and her neck was pulled over to the right constantly for months and months and months. Her head was just spontaneously pulled over to the right, and it was causing her a great deal of pain and stuff. And so I asked my guides, to show me, and she was sitting here in my office, and what I saw was a big rope around her neck.
Wow.
Yeah, so I told this woman, well, there's a big, thick, energetic rope around your neck, and it's pulling your neck over and your head over to the right side. And she said, oh, what's that about? And so I said, well, just a moment and let me ask my guides. And my guide said for her to follow the rope. As I recall, that my guides told me to follow the rope and go to the end of the rope. And so I just energetically just followed the rope. And at the end, there stood a man, and he was holding the other end of the rope. Now, he was not trying to kill her or anything. So I described that I'm following out loud to her. I'm following this rope. And here's this man at the end, and I described what he looked like, and she gasped, and she said, you just described my husband exactly. And so here's the healing part of this was that my spirit guides actually told her for her to go back and follow the rope and for her to talk to her husband about what this was about. And I told her to do that. And I said, take your time and I will sit here quietly and I will be quiet until you speak. So I say that a lot to people. I'll be quiet until you speak. And she was quiet for a few minutes. And then she suddenly said, my husband has been pulling on that rope, but he doesn't mean to do me any harm. She said, I'm getting more and more into this spiritual awareness. And she said, he's afraid he's going to lose me. And so he was just pulling at her, not terribly, he's just kind of tugging at her, trying to energetically make sure that she stays with him. And so, my guides described to her how to take the rope off and for her to do it, not for me to do it. So that was key in her situation, that she needed to take the rope off and hand it back to him energetically. And that was a great part of the healing, that she energetically went back. They talked it over. They understood. And then she took the rope off of her own neck and gave it back. And she hadn't had any other problems after that. And she'd been to the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic. I mean, she's been to all these top name clinics and chiropractors and things like that, trying to figure out what's going on. And here it was as simple as talking it over with her husband on the energetic plane and working that out. I think it's a beautiful story. So I love that I thought of that just now.
I mean, for somebody who doesn't understand that this energetic realm that much, it sounds a little unreal. Like, how can one put an energetic rope on somebody else? And how do we know that we are not being held energetically by other people?
Well, it's all about, I guess I would begin by saying that the aliveness in us is our spirit. And the aliveness in us is very, very electrical. So we're electrified energy first and foremost, and that is our spirit. So the aliveness in our physical body is our electrically alive spirit. And so we are actually spirits, non-physical, in a non-physical world, and we're physical in a physical world as well. So I always talk to people about, in my opinion, the true balance of life is to live on the non-physical spiritual plane and at the same time as we live on the physical, so that we're non-physical and physical at the exact same time. And when we heal on a non-physical spiritual level, the physical body will tend to follow. It'll tend to follow the energetic healing. Now, I'm not saying to stop Western medicine at all, because I'm a registered nurse and my business partner is a medical doctor. And so we really believe, and I really talk to people about allowing this to be integrated together. So in other words, let's integrate the non-physical healing along with the physical, because our physical body, needs minerals, it needs water, it needs vitamins and nutrition and things like that, because it's a physical body. But the most profound healings that I've noticed over the years has been on the energetic level.
So how do we know that we don't have any bad energy or an entity attached to us?
It's truly working with the divine and sacred guides and working with our own awareness. So a lot of what I teach in my workshops and things like that is how to notice ourselves as non-physical, how to notice ourselves as energy. And literally, we can look down. In fact, the listeners can do this right now. Just close their eyes and just think and imagine. It'll always feel like imagination, too. I'll say more about that here in a minute. But you literally just look down inside of your body and just look all around as if you're watching a little movie, and just notice everything. Don't work hard at it. Just notice whatever you notice. And then I ask people to, not just send your energy out, maybe, 10, 12 inches out past your skin, and look around, all around in your energy that shines out past your skin, and just look for any areas that seem weak or thin or not as bright as other areas. And what else I have to tell people is to actually remember that they have a backside, because a lot of people they lose track that we have a backside, and our backs tend to be very vulnerable. So let's say, that there is a lot of times people are very aware of energetic cords. And so, you're looking around and all of a sudden you see, like my client, a thing that looks like a rope, or a thing that looks like a garden hose, or sometimes a cord, an energetic cord looks like a fireman's hose. So different sizes, but the way to know that it's negative is by the color or the shade or the density of it. So if you're looking around, and there's cords and it's real bright and shiny, and I follow that cord to the end, and it's, to the partner that I love, or it's to my kids, or, my grandma, or whatever. But the ones that are more negative will not be sparkly, they will not be shiny, they'll tend to be like sometimes a dark olive green, or a muddy color, sometimes even towards the blackish side, and they will be more dense. And so you see that shade and those darker colors will let people know that this is not positive like those bright and shiny threads going out to people that I love. Now, what I'll get back to hopefully I'm answering your question, but what I'll get back to is that when we work with the non-physical realm of our own body and non-physical realm of life, it will never, ever stop feeling like we're dreaming it up. It will always, 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 always feel like our imagination. And Orion, it's because it's non-physical. And so just because it feels like our imagination, that's like a feeling sensation of it, when in fact it is deep, deep truth. But if people can make this leap when they're, trying to be more intuitive or hoping to be more intuitive, to realize that it will always feel like we are imagining it because it is non-physical. Almost always it's non-physical.
So if one take a look inside his or her body and they see some dark colors, muddy, dark olive colors, what can they do to heal themselves?
You have great questions.
Thank you.
No, you do. You go right to the core of things. I like that. Well, here's another key in what I teach is, let's just say that the two of us right now, we needed some help in our physical body or help in our struggles in our life or something like that. And let's say that you and I just decide, well, let's call out to the universe and ask for help. So we sit there and in our minds, we call out to the universe and ask for help. Now think about this, that if we do not specify, that if we are not specific about who and what we want to help us, we've just opened up a door for, I always say, any old dead person floating by. And that dead person, you could say, oh, I can help you. And now you've got, a deceased person in spirit hanging around you. And that could, if that person, I'll just make something up right now, but if that deceased person maybe died of alcoholism or something, they would possibly still be holding on to that sensation of being drunk and all the physical sensations of it. Well, and then if you've called out to the universe for help and you've got a deceased person who died of alcoholism, well, then you're going to be touched in some way or affected by those vibrations, because everything's electrical and everything's an electrical spurts of energy. So I'm running around all over the world talking to people about this. I always use very, very specific words because every word that we think is also an electrical spurt out into the universe. So I want to always make sure I'm working with the divine and sacred, because those two words especially, and maybe, I could add holy if that feels like a powerful word to you or your listeners, pure, blessed, those words. But I always use divine and sacred because that narrows down the electrical signal of our thoughts, and it really specifies I'm not willing to work with any old person floating by. I am only willing to be guided by the divine and sacred. And that rules out, using those two words because they're electrical spurts, that rules out drawing in a negative person or a negative being.
What's the difference between a divine and sacred being to, let's say, an angel? Why would we just call on God?
Ooh, that's another great question. Well, in my experience, that's really what I teach is my experience, that the angels are divine and sacred. Now, even the angels have different layers of advancement, and most people would say archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, those are the most known, that they are also divine and sacred. So it doesn't rule out angels at all. It doesn't rule that out. But Here's what I would say to your question. Why not just talk to God directly? And we can certainly do that, but I would also include the divine and sacred guides. But it's kind of like, let's say right now you had a big pothole out on the street in your neighborhood. And people, they're driving and their car is getting damaged in the pothole. Well, do you call the governor of your state or the president of your country to fix the pothole, or do you call in a specialist for your area of your city who's in charge of potholes?
Depends on your relationship with your governor.
That is excellent. That is very, very
because
true.
If you could just call the governor, if you have a good relationship, and he'll take care of the rest. He'll call the angels. He'll just call an angel. They will call an angel, and they will fix everything.
Well, what I would say to that is, but does everybody, and if you really use that as a guide to look at, not everybody could have that special relationship with the governor. In truth, if we look at the physical world as it is, that's not the case. But when we work with the divine and sacred, they are a part of God. We're all a part of Source. But what I've found is over the years, and I talk to God all the time as well, but when I want a specialty or a special way of assistance, I call in a specialist. And what I have found is in the earth plane, doctors are specialists, nurses are specialists now. And my dad was a plumber. He had a specialty area he worked in, things like that. That when I called in a specialist who was specifically assigned to me. Now, by assigned, I mean who was directed by God to assist me, attend to me, help me, that kind of thing. Oh my goodness. When I started working with the divine and sacred specialist who specializes in me for whatever it was I wanted or needed, the level of my work increased for others, my level of my work for others and the level of my own life just excelled unbelievably. So really what I teach is just what has over and over and over again really made a difference, not just in my life, but in other people's lives as well. So if you could see it like that God has actually, because there's a very complicated network of the divine. And so if someone in the divine and sacred level who is holy is a specialist for me, gosh, I'll take that. And that's really how it started. I started to work with divine and sacred guides who specialize for me. And here's an example I'll share with you and people who are listening, is that when I go before a group of people for a workshop, some people will come up to me at the break and they'll say, I see 4 beams of light, and that's really beautiful blue light behind you. And I'll say, well, those are the professors. There are 4 of them. They call themselves the professors, and they assist me in teaching. And I'll say to the workshop, sometimes I lose track of really what I'm saying because I'm just listening to what they're directing me to teach. And so that's just one example of specialists that I have. And I have a specialist for book writing and that kind of thing.
What kind of beings are out there? So you got angels, and what type of beings are the professors, for example? What are other type of beings, and what are negative entities?
Oh, okay. Well, this might...
It's okay, we're going there.
Well, yes. Well, in fact, I love to go this direction because what people keep telling me is I'm willing to talk about things that they don't know anyone else who will be willing to talk about these things. So just to start out, my goodness, I think, in my experience with the non-physical realm, is that the non-physical is much more complicated, much more organized, much more active than the physical world. And most people think the physical world's pretty complicated, and it is, but there's so much more going on in the non-physical realm. And, I can only name a few. That there are spirits of nature, there are spirits of trees, there are all kinds of nature, there are spirits of water and earth and all of these. And there are angels at the archangel level, there are angels at other levels. I've had guides come in, and the guides that I know, and I will say, well, who is that one back behind you that I'm perceiving? And they'll say that is a student. Occasionally there's a student who has closely reached the divine and sacred. And sometimes I will ask people, they'll say, oh, I've got this guide and this guide. And sometimes they do okay and sometimes they don't. And I said, well, stop right now. And because they cannot lie to us, which thank goodness the non-physical world cannot lie to us. So I'll say, well, ask right now, tell me truly, do you meet the divine and sacred level? And people will say their guides just disappeared when they were asked directly if they were divine and sacred. So there's all kinds of levels. There's all kinds of levels of deceased people. Some are just beautiful. Some just zip out of their body, because I've been so lucky to be with people when they have passed on, and I can perceive when their soul leaves their physical body. And some just zip out of here, and they don't need any help. They're not met by anybody. They're just zoom out of here. And some, though, are fixated on the property that they had in their life. Some are, like I said in the example a little bit ago, some are fixated on the sensations of alcohol or drugs or whatever it is. And I kid around with people that I have so many bar stories that people would never go into a bar or a pub again. I have so many spirit stories about hanging out in bars. But so there's, just all types of levels of people in spirit, because there are all types of awareness in living people. Now, to answer your question about the negative, well, some of the deceased people are very, very negative. Some of them have been murderers and rapists and things like that, or have killed many, many people. And so, that's why I want everyone to be more discerning about who on earth they, invite in. And people get into trouble because they just call out to the universe for help. It's not defined enough, because our thoughts are electrical frequencies that shoot out past our skin into our energy field and out into the universe. So I beg people to get more and more precise about who it is you're inviting into your life, because this is how people start heading down, a darker path. And they didn't mean to do it, but they have been affected, and I call it an interference, with a terrible deceased person. Or there are also different levels of negative beings that are not human, because once again, the universe is so much more complicated than what the physical world is. So there are deceased people that are very, very negative, but there are also non-human beings. They're very positive, like the spirits of the nature and things like that, but there are also beings that are very, very negative and cause illness, cause struggles in life, even cause death for people.
Oh, wow. So how can we protect ourselves, and how do we know if a house is haunted? For example, in our house, I have the sensation that there is something going on, because we have many, many glitches of electricity. So many. The lights go on and off in weird times or in a weird way. Sometimes it will affect the computer, and it's more than just random. So what is it, and what do you do about it?
Well, if they're positive beings or positive deceased people, they will not interfere in our health. They won't interfere with our electronics. But the more negative that they are, the more they will tend to interfere with humans in all kinds of ways in their life. Now, your electrical question about your electronics, the computer, the lights going off and on, they can affect, they being non-physical beings of any type, they can more readily affect electronics because our spirit is electrical. And they are, even in the non-physical realm, they are electrical in nature. So it's really, really, really easy for them. And there's a little story I can tell you as an example. Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. A young man that I knew, he was probably in his late 30s, and they had 3 children with his wife, and his wife died of breast cancer and left this, 38-year-old man with her 3 children by himself. And she kept coming to me because they were friends of mine, and she kept coming to me, and she looked I still can't even remember of any deceased person that looked this beautiful this quickly. She was sparkly and lovely and beautiful. And she kept wanting me to get a hold of her husband and tell him that she's doing so great. And I would tell her, well, he's real religious, so I don't know how he's going to take this. And she'd come to me again and ask me every day until I finally gave up. And I called him. And I told him that how beautiful that she is. And I said, she is trying to get through to you and trying to get your attention. And she is showing me that she's messing with the clock and messing with the lights in the house. And he started crying. And he said, every time I leave the living room and I come back in, he said, the ceiling fan is on. And I turn it off. And then the next thing I know, the ceiling fan comes on again. And he's torn all the electrical stuff apart, trying to fix it. And, she's standing there giggling. And so he was convinced that she really was doing that. And this was a different belief for him. But see, she was trying to give him a physical, signal, I guess. So it's much, much easier for them to do it with electrical things, like, the clocks might go off. And
so she was of the light. She was good, and she messed up with the electricity. How do I know that whatever is messing up with the electricity here, if it is non-physical, is a beautiful light being or something other than that?
Now think about when your computer is interfered with, or the internet, or whatever part of the computer. What will happen is that the more negative the being is, they will become much more active when something very positive is about to happen. In other words, if you are doing a healing on the internet, on, Skype here or Zoom or whatever, then the negative forces will interfere with something that is potentially good and potentially healing. So that's one of the signals that you can get from that. For example, on the 3rd day of my workshops, when I do a Zoom or a live in-person workshop, the 3rd day I spend the whole entire morning on negative beings and negative deceased people. And here's an example, is that there will be 1 or 2 people that cannot get to that morning session, because I'm teaching people how to remove negativity from them and also how to have it carried back into God's love and light. And so the people who are interfered with, the students of mine who are interfered with by negativity, will have a hard time getting to that third day morning class. I've had people where they've had a flat tire.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. One woman was locked in her elevator in her apartment complex.
Wow.
The elevator's stuck. Just on and on and on, all kinds of stories about that. So the negative will tend to interfere with something positive that is going to happen. So
what can we do about it?
Well, there are divine and sacred specialists, and you can call them in. And if, for example, let's say there was a negative non-human entity that was causing the problems, then I would call in. I would just invite in my head, because our thoughts are electrical spurts out there. I would say, I call out for a divine and sacred guide who specializes in this particular being or entity, if you want to use that word, and come forward now. And then I ask for that entity to be wrapped in God's white glowing light and taken out to the best place for their highest transformation back into Source's light. So one of the things I run around all over the world teaching is not to be a victim to dark energy or dark entities, because they exist. But you know what? Ugly does not mean more powerful. Just because they're negative, it does not mean they're more powerful. It just means they're actually more needy, or they wouldn't be bothering us. They wouldn't be trying to drain us. They wouldn't be trying to interfere. So I really want the listeners to hear that negative deceased people or negative non-human things are not more powerful than we are, and they're not more powerful than God's grace and God's light and love.
Your approach is not to confront whatever it is and just call in the specialist and ask the specialist to help with this.
You can confront them, but realize that they are real beings. In fact, a deceased person is really just as alive as you and I are right now. They're just not dragging around a physical body, but they're just as alive as we are. So if you chase them, I have another little story here. If you chase them off, they will actually leave, but then they'll come back. And you can chase them off again, and they'll leave, because we're really the boss of what's going on. Most people don't realize it. And so here's a real quick story. One of my mentoring students, she was new to working with me, and she was so proud of herself. She said, there are deceased people and there are terrible negative entities in my house, and I've chased them all away. And while she's telling me this big, long story, I'm seeing them intuitively running to the neighbor's house. And so, see, that doesn't help them. See, I want us to also be a participant in their healing. So, we chase them off or confront them. It doesn't help them to go back into God's light. It doesn't help them evolve. They just run down the street and then they'll come back. So I like making you giggle. That's funny. So, but see, because they're real. So what we do is call in a specialist who knows exactly, a divine and sacred specialist who knows exactly about this particular being. And yes, we can talk to the being if we want, but I really want them, when you do this as much as I do, you kind of skip some steps and speed things up. I just have them wrapped, even the more horrible ones, just wrapped really tightly in white light and taken to the best place, which I don't even know where that is, the best place for their transformation into light and love.
Nice. So do they always leave when you do that?
Yes.
What if the best place for transformation is right here in that place that you were dealing with them?
But I'm commanding to the divine and sacred specialist to take them wherever is the best place. So I don't know. Some of them, it might be here on Earth, and they're transformed, and some
No, what I was saying is like, what if like there is a haunted house, and you say, I want you to take them to for their best place for their transformation, and that haunted house is the best place, and then how can you move them?
Well, because I'm not saying just transfer them to any old place. I'm saying transfer them to, or carry them, might be another word too, to the place for a transformation back into love and light, or to love and light. So just hanging out in a haunted house would not be where divine and sacred would take them.
Right. You are right. I want to talk to you about our guides, and how do we find our guides? How do we connect to them, and how do we even know who they are?
I would start out by saying they are real. And if you call out to them, again, be careful what you call out for. Use divine, sacred, holy, blessed, so that you get the most advanced in the of God's beings, basically. It will never stop feeling like you're dreaming it up. But if you call out for that type and that level of assistance, it will absolutely be there no matter what. And we living humans are the only thing that gets in the way. We'll say, oh, I don't know. I probably just made that up, but it seems like maybe there was some sparkles going on in the corner of my bedroom, or something like that. Well, we are the only ones that get in the way. We living humans. If we call out for those helpers, I know that they are there. Period, the end, they are there. Now it's up to us whether we notice them, whether we feel, oh, here's what my guides are telling me right now to bring up. A lot of times people don't feel that they deserve to work with divine and sacred, or they don't feel like they deserve to have the divine and sacred even try to help them. So I had a client earlier today who I said, my guides are telling me you don't feel like you deserve to have these beautiful guides. She says, and she started crying. She says, you're right. It's a deserving thing. So we're the only ones that get in the way. If we call out to them, they are there. They are there. We're the only ones that struggle to recognize it.
It seems like we, the people on earth, are commanding something that is divine and sacred, like they work for us. How does this work in a in a non-ego way? I command and demand from you, angel, come help me now because I'm big and mighty. And you know what? I also think that a lot of people that get into spirituality fall into those ego traps of right now I can do a lot.
Oh, yes. You're right on about that. It goes to their head. Absolutely. It's very important to realize that when I say to command, I'm not saying, my grandkids call each other bossy cows. So I'm not saying become a bossy cow for the divine and sacred. When I say the word command them, I'm really saying use very, very precise, exact words, and really feel these words when you say them. And all that does is it creates a very specific electrical frequency that just shoots out beyond your skin and beyond your energy field and out into the universe. And the non-physical then can match that very, very specific frequency. So in other words, like if you and I just called out for help, well, then we're going to get some, dead person floating by. But when we call out for the divine and sacred and we say exactly what it is we want or need, they can match that electrically, because it's like attracts like. It is, they can meet you with that more clearly with that very clear command. So that's really all I mean when commanding. Use very precise words, and I mean it when you say it. Really feel like, oh boy, I really want a divine and sacred guide who specializes in my medical health.
So when you talk about frequency, my question is, do we have to be super elevated and all like very holy to call in the sacred beings? Or what happens if we call them where we are in despair, or when we feel sick or not angry, have negative emotions? How does that frequency affect us calling in a divine and sacred being that is of a higher frequency?
Well, generally in those situations that you're describing, very sick or maybe in extreme sorrow, extreme grief, then our need is so great. And we still, if we are specific with our words, that need is so great that it just draws them so fast and so specific. If you call out for the divine and sacred to help me with this sorrow or the loss of somebody in my family, you get a very precise being who knows exactly how to help you.
Can we develop the ability to see them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Seeing them is, everybody thinks they have to see everything with their eyes open, when in fact, apparently I'm pretty good at this, but really, I will admit, probably, I don't know, 75% of what I perceive is in my mind's eye. So we don't have to see everything with our eyes open, although we can. But you know what gets in people's way is they expect it to be something specific. And if it doesn't show up the way they think it should be, they miss it altogether. So spirit, sometimes these divine and sacreds don't have a human form, for example. Sometimes they're so elevated, they've never even been in a human form. So see, if you expect a human form to show up and you get some ball of light, most people will just discount it. So our expectations get in the way a lot.
Wow, there is so much more I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of your time. So before we say goodbye for now, I want to ask you 2 questions. One is, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life? And then I would like to know, how can people find you? And maybe you can share a little bit about your workshops and everything that you offer.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. So 3 tips in life is basically what I've said. Absolutely know that you are a non-physical spirit in a physical body. Number 2, I guess, would be to know we humans have so darn much choice in life that gets us into a pickle sometimes because we have so much choice. So be careful with your choices. And the 3rd one, I would say, we are spirits, and we do deserve to work with the most beautiful, divine and sacred. If we weren't meant to work with them and to learn from them, they wouldn't show up. But they show up if you call them. So that's what my response to your request there, those three tips.
Thank you.
Yes. So to get a hold of me, my website is just tinazion.com. And I am about to start a workshop through Shift Network. And I also have 2 Zoom live courses coming up this fall. And then also 1 live in-person one at Art of Living in North Carolina. And then 2 of them, like I said, are on Zoom, so you can be anywhere around, and then the Shift Network. So I'm actually a faculty member for 5 different organizations and healing centers.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Tina.
Oh, thank you for very, very, very special questions. Thank you. It's very unusual. And I love this.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember that you are non-physical in a physical body. Be careful with your choices. And remember that you deserve to work with the most beautiful, divine, and sacred being. And have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time. Thank you for joining me on my mission to light people up and change lives around the world. I hope today's conversation inspires you to step up, go after the life of your dreams, and be who you want to be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to stellarlifepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and other cool stuff. And please subscribe, review, and help spread the word by sharing us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you on the next episode.